On the Track is a web TV show about cryptozoology, natural history, green issues and whatever else the team feel like making up as they go along. Enjoy!
What's in this episode, Mr. John?
Well, Hennis, in this week's episode, we learn all about a lioness that was found roaming around the Berlin area of Germany. Or was it? And we go back to Ian Scribbs, who tells us all about the thrilling story of the Feegee Mermaid.
I really like the old credits.
Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name's John Downs and welcome to... What's that over there?
It's Gwen Dibley's Pearl Southwester.
When youth takes a scorpion as a bedfellow, the aged go out on the roof.
Good afternoon ladies and gentlemen, starting properly for once. I'm John Downs, I'm the Director of the Centre for Fortean Story, and welcome to another episode of On the Track. And this week I have with me the lovely Miss Isabel.
Hello.
For those of you who don't know, every Wednesday evening at 6:30 and every Saturday afternoon at 3 we bring you a miscellany of hard science, weird shit, and surreality. What's surreality? Well, I think you probably need to ask the dog.
Surrealism is a cultural movement that developed in Europe in the aftermath of World War I, in which artists depicted unnerving, illogical scenes and developed techniques to allow the unconscious mind to express itself like. Its aim was, according to leader Andre Breton, to resolve the previously contradictory conditions of dream and reality into an absolute reality, a super reality or surreality.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, before we start, I have some sad news for you. Veteran Yeti and Bigfoot hunter Peter Byrne has died at the age of 97. God bless him, and his legacy will never be forgotten. Also, on a more personal and local level, Karina's pet hen, Henny Penny, escaped from her run when a corn of it blew down in a gale the other day. She disappeared and we haven't seen her since. As there is an old dog fox that comes across the garden quite regularly, I think that it is quite likely that she has fallen foul of him. One thing I would like to say, though, this is what I was planning to do while she was still alive and forgot and never got around to it, is I believe that chickens kept in battery conditions are usually culled after they reach the age of 9 months. Henny Penny was just shy of her 10th birthday, or hatch day, and she was still producing eggs at a rate of 1 or 2 a week. It's this horrible profligacy and commodification of animals that has made me become pretty well a vegan. And now I no longer have a hen to give the occasional egg to me, I am even more of a vegan. But now let's talk about the main crux of today's show, at least the first half of today's show. Last week, the world, or at least the cryptozoological world, and large chunks of Germany became very shocked to hear that a lioness, or an animal described as being a lioness, was at loose in one of the suburbs of Berlin. And being the way that Germans always are, they dealt with the problem methodically.
Now, there is a line on the loose. You will stay in your huts, or you will be made to play hopscotch on the minefields.
As you may or may not know, the CFZ has a representative in Germany. Her name is Daisy, and she sends us all sorts of interesting things, but nothing so interesting as the events which happened in late July, when there was apparently a rogue lioness on the loose near Berlin. The sighting took place in Kleinmachnow, a suburb of Berlin, at roughly the same time as I was coming out of hospital for the second time, and the police were first alerted on the 19th of July. A police spokeswoman said they had received calls and a video alerting them to the wild animal, and as a result they immediately began their search. Say what you like about the Germans, but they're bloody efficient, and at least 30 police cars were deployed, as were helicopters with heat-seeking equipment. According to the BBC, on Thursday evening, police told a local resident that they had just seen the lioness and that the search for the animal had entered a hot phase. German outlet Bild reported, adding that officers shouted at joggers to
Get out of the woods immediately.
There were lockdowns called all over the immediate area, with people, particularly the elderly and the very young, being told they could not leave the safety of their own homes. Good golly, Miss Molly, it was just like COVID all over again. These people who believe in such things, it was another excuse, perfect excuse, for the German government to see how strictly they could get away with controlling all the activities of their people. I, however, wouldn't say anything anywhere near so libellous. After all, who's ever heard of a German government lying in order to control their people?
Lies? Lies? There is no such thing as lies. Now,
Over the years, we've seen some strange convolutions occur with stories like this, but I think that this one is probably the most ridiculous to date. Because after a few days of being loose, the strangest twist that I could ever have foreseen took place. The mayor of Kleinmachnow woke up to find a horse's head in his bed, and the son of the local crime boss broke cover to talk to the newspapers. Police have been searching for more than a day after being notified about a wild animal on the loose, but have yet to find it. Now the son of the head of the Remo family has said he can lead the lioness back to her enclosure. Firas Remo has urged the authorities not to shoot the creature. In a post on social media, he asked for anyone with information about the animal's whereabouts to let him know first, so he can step in before some idiot shoots her. The Remos belong to the Mahalami ethnic group, primarily native to southern Turkey and Lebanon. The Remo family had fled war-torn Lebanon and come to Europe in the 1980s. The Mahalami mostly identify as Arab and are sometimes associated with Kurdish minorities. The Remo family first came to police attention in 1992 with the murder of a restaurant owner in Berlin. Since then, some of the estimated 500 family members have turned the Remo clan into one of Berlin's most notorious gangs, with a long record of violence, drug trafficking, money laundering and fraud. One of Germany's foremost historical figures famously said that
if you're going to tell a lie, you might as well make it a big one.
And what came next suggests that various people in the local government of Kleinmachnow may have taken old Heinrich's advice. The video, which was taken early on in the affair, and which has, despite vague mentions of other videos, remained the only picture of the Berlin Lioness to have been made public, does seem to me to be that of a large felid. The face certainly looks like that of a lioness rather than that of a puma, which is the only other big cat species that vaguely fits the same description. But unless someone with more botanical knowledge than me can tell that the flora in the background of the video categorically cannot be found in a German woodland, one must always bear in mind the possibility that the video of the lioness, or should I say lioness, was taken somewhere else where lionesses are less problematical residents. Despite the fact that all the witnesses continued to identify the mystery beast as a big cat, by the end of day 3, various official channels would begin to disseminate the story that what these people had actually seen was a large wild boar. This was despite the fact that the mystery beast allegedly killed and ate a wild boar, and although wild swine are generally thought of as omnivorous, they're not known to kill their own kind. By the morning of day 5, the newspapers and the social media had all decided to follow the party line that the silly billies who originally reported and filmed the animal had been particularly frightened by a large wild pig. Once again, what appeared to be sincere witnesses have been sacrificed at the altar of the German equivalent of the Health and Safety Executive. Like Lewis Carroll's Snark, the Berlin Lioness has softly and silently vanished away and turns out to have been a boojum all along. Well, that's what I thought. But at least 2 people within the CFZ family disagree with me and believe that this film actually does show a wild pig rather than a lioness. Over to you, V. McCrennan. Why do you think that the film shows a wild pig rather than a lioness?
Well, it's a particularly bad video technically. It's very, very blurry, and you can't even tell the shape of the ears, or they look fairly roundy like a lioness from a distance. But there's one part of its anatomy that's very clear in the video, even though it's only for about half a second, and that is its tail. And it's clearly a wild boar's tail, not cat's tail. Cat's tail is furry all the way down, and wild boar's tail is often fairly sort of skin-ish on the surface until it gets down to the bottom, and then you've got a sort of tuft.
But lionesses are the only big cat that one can find that actually also has a tuft on the end of its tail.
Yes, but it has fur all the way down, unless it's got mange. If it's got sarcoptic mange, then possibly. You should ask Richard as well, because he was saying the same thing. He gets the same name. Well, he did last time. But,
The trouble is, Richard is at the moment in the Midlands looking after his grandfather, and so we're not going to be able to video him in time for this show, but I will have him on in a future one stating his point of view. But now, for anybody who has had enough of the story of the Berlin, I keep on put my iPad down to say, Lioness. Let's go over for something completely different. Good afternoon, Ian. How lovely to see you again. And I believe, for once, you are not traipsing up and down the highways and byways of the Great Glen. You're going to take us somewhere else.
Yes, well, hello, John. It's good to be back on CF TV and have another peek into our cabinet of curiosities. And today we're going to cover the fishy tale of the Feegee mermaid. So, there are many cryptozoological creatures, and the one thing that they all have in common is that there's no hard evidence for their existence. We have unreliable eyewitnesses. We have blurry photos of logs floating in lakes. And we have shaky film footage of a man in a monkey suit walking through a forest. But what we have never had is a living or dead specimen of one of these fabulous creatures. So, or have we though? In the 1800s, a specimen of a dead half-man, half-fish type creature turned up, and it was referred to as the Feegee mermaid. The Feegee mermaid was supposedly caught off the coast of Fiji Islands in the South Pacific and was acquired by Dutch merchant sailors from a Japanese man in 1822. The Dutch merchant ship sank, and an American captain named Samuel Barrett Edis rescued the crew and the mermaid. Edis was so fascinated by the mermaid that he brought it from the Dutch sailors in January 1822. He had to sell his ship to pay the $6,000 price. Edis needed travel money, so he exhibited the mermaid in Cape Town. There it was met with fanfare. A prominent English missionary wrote a much circulated newspaper article that attested to the mermaid's validity. Unlike images of mermaids in folklore and popular culture, the Feegee mermaid was described as follows. It was a hideous stuffed specimen, dried or mummified. Its skin was black and semi-translucent. It was around 3 feet long and was posed in an awkward stance. Its mouth was open, its tail turned over, and its arms thrown in the air, giving it the impression of having died in great agony. So, we can have a look at an image of the infamous Feegee mermaid then. Let's have a look at that picture there. So, yes. So there we are.
That's,
Not a very pleasant sight, is it? So,
no, it's quite scary as well.
yes. But it's definitely an unknown half-man, half-fish type creature. So, yeah. In September 1822, Edis arrives in London with the mermaid. He set up a display in a coffee house with the mermaid under a thick glass dome. It was called The Remarkable Stuffed Mermaid and was an overnight success, becoming the talk of the town. Every day, hundreds of people would pay 1 shilling to see the mermaid. And we can see in the next image there, John, we can actually see an image of the mermaid in its glass dome as it was displayed in the coffee shop at that time. So that would set you back 1 shilling to see, which was a lot of money in those days. Edis, who seems to believe that the mermaid was real, invited 2 prominent naturalists to examine it. They proclaimed it a fake, but Edis consulted other, less knowledgeable naturalists who said it was legitimate. This pleased Edis, who, in an act of great hubris, eventually claimed that one of the prominent naturalists, Sir Everard Home, had also stated the mermaid was genuine. Home was furious and got several respected publications to announce that the mermaid was a fraud. This was the beginning of the end for the Edis success with the mermaid. The rush of articles denouncing the mermaid also implied that the public was gullible. Attendance at the mermaid exhibit fell off, and in January 1823, the coffee house closed. Over the next few years, the mermaid toured England, but it was not overtly popular as news of its fakery had circulated the country. The mermaid was taken, then packed away in storage and wasn't touched for about 20 years until Edith passed away, and the mermaid was inherited by his son, who promptly sold it to Moses Kimball of the Boston Museum in 1842. Kimball travelled from Boston to New York to show his new purchase to his friend, P.T. Barnum, who had recently purchased a museum there. Barnum was known as America's Greatest Showman and promoted his museum by labeling it the greatest show on earth to exhibit his plethora of curiosities. And we can see one of Barnum's promotional posters in the next picture there, John. You can see that. P.T. Barnum's Museum, the greatest show on earth, showing General Tom Thumb and other various curiosities, including the Feegee Mermaid.
It's a remarkable depiction of the Feegee mermaid. Looks exactly like it.
It is, yes. Kimball suggested that they work together on exhibiting the mermaid, although Barnum wasn't fully convinced of its authenticity. He did believe it could draw the public to his museum, and he agreed to lease it off Kimball for $12.50 every week. The Feegee Mermaid was instrumental in Barnum's success. Not only was it hugely popular, but it set the foundation for many of his later tactics for generating interest in his curiosities. Barnum concocted quite an elaborate scheme to get people to part with their money. The plan was to generate just a small amount of interest from the press at first. He did this by sending letters to newspapers from various fake people in Alabama and South Carolina who had met Dr. Griffin from London and had seen his amazing collection of creatures, including the mermaid. The next step of his plan was for the fictional Dr. Griffin to arrive in Philadelphia. Playing the role of Dr. Griffin was Levi Lyman, who was one of Barnum's associates and had worked with him on creating a hoax before. But Dr. Griffin proved pivotal in the mermaid's success. At the time, new arrivals from around the world were still being discovered, and Dr. Griffin showed the public other unusual animals like the duck-billed platypus, which seemed to offer proof that he was a real naturalist and that the mermaid was real. Levi Lyman, still disguised as Dr. Griffin, then traveled to New York to showcase the Feegee mermaid to a small audience. The press were under the impression that multiple people had vouched for Dr. Griffin and they had seen his duck-billed platypus in person already, but it never crossed their minds that the Feegee mermaid would not be the real deal. Dr. Griffin arranged for a week-long exhibition in the New York Concert Hall, and crowds flooded to see the mermaid. The fake naturalist gave lectures stating that land-dwelling animals all have their counterparts in the ocean. Seahorses, sea lions, etc. So it made sense that sea humans would also exist. You can see his logic there. The idea of first showing the Feegee mermaid at a venue other than Barnum's American Museum was a brilliant strategy, because Barnum knew his reputation was tarnished or suspect, and that people had not forgotten the Joyce Heth hoax from a few years before. Barnum claimed a woman called Joyce Heth was 161 years old, when in fact she was in her 70s. So, after a week at the New York Concert Hall, Dr. Griffin generously agreed to let Barnum show the mermaid at his American Museum. Attendance at the museum tripled. Barnum also printed 10,000 pamphlets which depicted beautiful mermaids modelled on voluptuous women and completely different to that of the Feegee mermaid's actual appearance. But given its success, the public didn't seem to mind. And we can see in the next picture there, John, you can see one of these pamphlets that Barnum used to advertise the grotesque Feegee mermaid. And yes, was a bit misleading there. So, but that was Barnum for you. That's what he did. So, in 1859, Barnum took the mermaid on tour to London. where again it was proved very popular. When he returned to the United States, the Feegee Mermaid was displayed at Kimball's Museum in Boston, and it spent the rest of its days alternating between there and Barnum's American Museum. The fate of the Feegee Mermaid is unknown, but it seems likely that it was destroyed in the fire. Kimball's Museum burned down in 1865, and Barnum's Museum burnt down in 1868. In 1897, 2 years after Kimball's death, a mermaid exhibit was donated to Harvard University's Peabody Museum by Kimball's heirs, where it is still on display today, but it's unknown whether this is the original Feegee mermaid. We can actually see that mermaid in the following shot then. So let's look at the next picture there, John, and look at the Peabody mermaid. So, yes, the Peabody mermaid looks significantly different from the original Feegee mermaid, which is depicted as mounted vertically with a large head. The Peabody mermaid is horizontal like a fish with a small head. The arms of the Feegee are raised to the head, whereas the Peabody arms are lower in front of the body. The Peabody mermaid also has no solid documentation that their mermaid was the one that Barnum rented from Moses Kimball. And Kimball did exhibit mermaids at later times, so it could be that the mermaid in the Kimball Museum, in the Peabody Museum, is a later one. So it could certainly be argued that it is in rather good condition, which indicates that it was a later version and not as well traveled as the Feegee mermaid itself. So there we go. The modern Barnum Museum, which is located in Bridgeport, Connecticut, displays a replica of the Feegee mermaid based on original descriptions. And this was made for a TV documentary. We can actually see a picture of this in the following picture there, John. I'm going to show that. So there it is. Yeah, nice. And so there we go. But, okay then. That's the story of the Feegee mermaid. But what exactly was the Feegee mermaid? Well, okay then. The origin of the mermaid is not known for certain, but it was likely created in the early 1800s by a Japanese fisherman as a joke. The mermaid itself was probably constructed from the upper body of an orangutan and the lower tail half of a salmon, and then stitched together. It would then have been stuffed and dried, and such figures were also used in religious practices in Japanese and East Indian villages, and this also may explain the mermaid's origin. It was then sold to Dutch merchants, as the Dutch were the only Westerners allowed to trade with Japan at the time. So, and then in 1853, Commodore Matthew Perry opened trade between Japan and the rest of the Western world, and thereafter many more fake mermaids began to appear on the scene. A CT scan of the mermaid on display at the Peabody Museum revealed that it was made up of a wire frame, paper mache, bone fragments, and fish scales. So another disappointment there. So yeah, there you have the fishy tale of the Feegee mermaid, the story of how a fake monster crept its way into some of the most popular museums in the world. Thank you.
If you want to support us and help us make more content like these, please press like, subscribe, follow our Facebook page and check out our Patreon.
And there's the ghost of Joe Strummer, who's an ever more regular visitor to my little studio, asks me to remind you all, always press the notification bell, otherwise you'll never find out when the next show's going to be.
And that would be an awful pity, wouldn't it?
And so, ladies and gentlemen, here we are at the end of another episode. I hope you enjoyed it. because I certainly enjoyed putting it together. I want to say a big, big thank you to everybody who's involved in this show, particularly Miss Isabel, V. McCrinnan, my producer Louie, and of course Ian Scribbs. And I'm going to be back. I'm going to be back on Wednesday. What am I going to be talking about? Oh, don't ask silly questions. I've got no idea what I'm talking about on Wednesday. But I'll be back next Saturday when the show will at least partially be about Yorkshire sea monsters. But there will be other stuff as well. So, without further ado, I bid you adieu without further ado. I am going to say, McCrinnan, are you there? He's not here with me at the moment, so we just have to assume that McCrinnan is going to be there, because if he's there and I'm there, I'll be seeing you.